You're listening to the Station 71 podcast with your host, Mario.
Beth.
And Brian.
All right, so this week we kind of got thrown off track a little bit. Our schedules didn't really line up the way we wanted them to, so you'll notice we are missing Kirsten. So that was a little weird to do that intro without her. So this week, instead of doing what we had originally planned, which you'll find out next week, we're going to do a little game similar to what we did last week with the attractions and superlatives, and we're just going to do top fives. Top five best queues and the top five worst queues. Where do you guys want to start with this? Do you want to go worst first and then best?
I vote worst. I like to finish on a good note.
Yeah, I think best will take longer.
Okay, cool. Worst is going to be interesting for sure. So we'll start with five. Five being the best of the worst, if that makes sense. So my number 5 was Frozen. I have Frozen Ever After on that list just because when I thought of the worst queues, I thought of ones that either didn't really have theming or had really good theming on the ride, but the queue was very lackluster. I think I talked like a little bit last week about how much I really liked the Frozen ride for what it was, at least the animatronics and stuff like that. But the queue itself is very lackluster and flat. There's one little section that's got some nice stuff to look at, but otherwise it's pretty bland and boring in my opinion.
Yeah, I considered putting that on my list, but ultimately it didn't make the cut just because of that one little area that has like the nice lighting and like the facades of the buildings and stuff, because I do really like that little spot. But overall, you're right, it doesn't really have a whole lot of good theming.
See, it was hard because like that little section with the Wandering Oakens was like, it was almost notable enough that I could have put it on there, but in the end I just couldn't bring myself to not put it on there because like everything besides that section is just so one-dimensional.
Yeah, just a few like framed photos kind of speckled throughout.
Pretty much.
Yeah, the queue doesn't really have much to do with the actual Frozen ride. They're just reusing a lot of the old the elements from the exit of Maelstrom when you come off.
Yeah, and you can tell.
And I mean, to be fair, they don't have that much space to work with, considering that like there wasn't a lot in the way of where they could do the queue, and they kind of had to compensate for people. But still, I think that Disney could have done a lot more there.
I agree.
Anyway, Beth, I think it's your turn.
So my number 5, my best of the worst. Hope I don't get a whole lot of hate for this, but I put It's a Small World just because it's like the room is pretty, don't get me wrong, and you get to see the boats coming and going, but you're listening to the same song over and over again that you're about to have to hear for the next 13 or so minutes. So it's just like overkill in my opinion. And there's like nothing other, like, there's only so many times you can look around the room and see how pretty it is until you get bored, and every once in a while the little cuckoo clock comes out. But other than that, I feel like it's very bland.
Yeah, that almost made my list. I don't know. I think I found other things that I wanted to put on there over it, but I would say that's definitely an honorable mention.
A lot of the classic Fantasyland attractions have these really just bland, like, switchback queues that are popular at like really cheap lower tier theme parks, and I think Small World is deserving of an update that a lot of the other ones have gotten.
Right.
Yeah, I haven't really looked at the other parks versions.
I mean, I haven't either, but I definitely think that like there's a lot more they could have done with it, especially if they had updated it, though that is a very small switchback area. So I don't know how much they could have done inside or like, made it more interactive. But to Brian's point, even the ones that kind of like Winnie the Pooh stemmed from Mr. Toad, that one got a really nice queue. Mm-hmm. And that's interactive, but it's still a switchback outside. They could do stuff like that to just kind of add to the, ambiance of the area.
Yeah, definitely. So Brian, what'd you pick?
I've might be a little surprising, but I put Spaceship Earth.
Okay, I can give you that.
It's one of those, and when I was making my list, it kind of I had trouble coming up with a fifth one in my worst queue category. And I was going through just a list of different attractions, and when I came on Spaceship Earth, I thought about it and I said, there's really nothing to the queue. It's an outdoor, pretty much switchback, all the way up until you get on the ride. I mean, there's only, maybe 10 to 20 feet of queue once you're actually in the door, and at that point, you're, getting on the Omnimover. So there's not much theming, and you're outside in the heat. So, yeah, this one doesn't do it for me.
That one is actually my number 4, so I definitely agree with your sentiments. There's, all there is the ambient music and like a mural of astronauts at the front, and then everything else is just like standing.
I love the mural. I love the art design on that, but that's about all there is to this queue.
I didn't even think of that one, which I'm kind of surprised with because I really do love that ride. Like you said, Beth, or Brian, I love that ride, and I guess maybe that overshadowed how much I realized there isn't a lot in that queue. Then again, it's also a walk-on most of the time. Mm-hmm. So the fact that there isn't really too much of a queue, I guess, never bothered me because I've always walked right through those switchbacks. But thinking about it now, they're there.
Yeah.
So my number 4 was, and I feel like this kind of goes in the same vein as Frozen and similarly enough to Spaceship Earth, but I put Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor. I mean, the inside's themed, I guess, but like what really made me think of this one was that little hallway that's carpeted right up until the theater room. Because like right before that, they start to do really well with it. Like there's the or the laugh canisters. There's all that stuff, and then you walk into that room that's like right before the theaters, and it's just a carpeted hallway that's got like clipboards, or not clipboards, pushpin boards and stuff like that hanging on the walls, and they like tried to make it work, but that's just super lazy to me.
Yeah.
This one and ones that do similar things is when it's not even really a queue. They like funnel as many people as possible into a hallway, and you don't really have a spot. It's just how willing you are to push yourself near the front. So that really bugs me about this one.
Yeah.
I don't know. This one was like one of those weird ones that kind of just popped into my mind, and I was trying to figure out where I could place it on my list. And I think the beginning is enough to kind of put it at least higher up in the like better of the worst. But that one section just kills it for me.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I kind of put all of those funnel type queues as like an honorable mention, where you're just like standing in a big crowd. But I didn't think that they were necessarily in my top 5 worst, so I kind of just lumped them all as an honorable mention.
Number 4 is the Mad Tea Party. Just another one. You've got an outdoor, pretty much a switchback queue. Nothing to it, no theming. I know it would be hard to do much with what the ride is, and obviously it's not in a show building, and there's not a whole lot to do with it, but it's still little to no theming and just hot outdoor switchback.
That's so funny. I feel like I'm just like a step behind you because I put Mad Tea Party as my number 3. Just like you said, it to me feels like you're at a state fair, and I hate that.
Yeah.
I thought about putting those on my number 3 because they're not number 3, but anything beyond that. Because you also have like the half the rides in the Chester and Hester's area, like all those little like small sections of queues where they kind of just like wrap around the ride. There's a couple of them. But I went for one that I think Beth is probably going to kill me for. I picked Kilimanjaro Safari. Because there's not really anything to look at. Even till you get to the point that you board, there's just TVs around you. Like there's a couple little sections where you go through like that one like outposty thing, and that's pretty much it. It would be cool and fitting to the ride if they at least put some kind of signs to tell you like about the different plants and stuff like that, or anything that would just like catch my attention. But I feel like every time I walk onto this ride, I'm just like, all right, can we get there yet?
No, I actually am not mad at all because I, for a second, considered putting it on my own list for the same reason. Because, I mean, it's... Maybe I'm just remembering things fondly, but I feel like the queue used to be more interesting. Like the videos used to be different or something.
Well, they were still trying to tie it in with the, when there was actually kind of a plot line to Kilimanjaro Safaris. Which...
Oh, right.
Those were the days I miss when that ride had a plot.
Yeah, but I totally agree. It would be, I think, it would be pretty easy just to add some, like, I don't know, infographics or something about the different animals, just fun facts. You know, they have those couple of signs that teach you a few, like, Swahili words. And if they just hung a few more signs, it would be a lot more appealing to me.
Really easy one to improve on. So, are we still on number 3? Was that your number 3, Mario?
That was mine. I think Beth is next, unless...
Well, my number 3 was Met
right.
Tea Party.
Oh, that's right.
Brian took hers.
So my number 3, and you'll see a pretty common theme here with my worst 3, but number 3 is the Magic Carpets of Aladdin.
Okay.
This is I can say the same things I said about this one with the Mad Tea Party. It's outside. It's a switchback. There's no theming. That's it. Standing between metal gates and making your way to the front. So
The only redeeming quality I would give that is getting to watch people get spit on by the camel.
Yep. And see, my thing with the switchbacks, and this is kind of why I didn't put this one on there, is because they're outside, I think the area theming and the land theming tie into enough of the queue that it would be a slightly redeeming quality for me. But it's still also kind of lazy.
Yeah.
My number 2, which is kind of... I feel like this is a cop-out, because most of mine were like, they tried to theme it, but it didn't do well. I put the Speedway. It's another one that's just a line, and there's nothing, like, exciting to look at. And if you're in that area, you have the smell of the fumes. Like, it's just not a good time.
In anywhere near the Speedway, and having to wait in line is even worse. So,
Yep. Well, I'll go ahead and tell you that the Speedway was my number 1, and we're just all like on the same page today, I guess. But yeah, I absolutely hate going anywhere near that attraction, and I am so unsettled that they're still using actual gasoline.
yeah, the most un-Tomorrow-ish thing in Tomorrowland.
Yes, Yesterdayland.
I really wish they would just update the cars or something, just to get rid of that smell.
Yeah, it's awful. It's so overwhelming.
Like, just put some electric go-karts or something in there.
Yeah, it'd be so easy. I mean, I guess it would take a while, but...
Close it for a refurb. No one would miss it.
Yeah, that's not a ride that people go to Magic Kingdom, and if they don't get to ride it, they're going to be upset.
We just offended that one listener. This is their favorite ride.
But for my number 2, I put Soarin'.
Oh, that was my number 1.
I hate that queue, and I will never ride Soarin' without a fast pass because it's so long and just big, empty walls. Absolutely nothing to look at.
As much as I hated on it last week, it did not make my worst 5.
Oh, wow.
I really thought it would, because I was picking this for my number 1, and I was like, you know what? Brian and I are going to agree on this one.
Here's what I will say about it. It's probably the absolute worst e-ticket queue in Disney World by far. I don't think any other top tier e-ticket attraction comes close to having as bad of a queue as Soarin' does. But if we're comparing it with everything, I think a lot of the lower tier rides have way worse queues. So not great by any means. Trust me, if y'all listen to my little rant last week about soaring, you know how I feel about it. But yeah, still not a good queue by any means.
The redeeming quality for this one for me was the fact that there's like at least something to do while you wait. It does take forever to get through, but at least there's something to look at. But it still is my number one.
And it's inside, which is a small plus for me. At least you're not sitting out in the heat all day.
Yeah. This is why Soarin' was number 2 for me and Speedway was number 1, because you're standing in the heat for that one.
Well, for my number 2, I'm going back to Tomorrowland, and I am going on Astro Orbiter. So this one, I get the idea behind kind of building the actual ride up on the second level of this structure, but them putting the elevator in there, getting on and off the ride, makes the queue a nightmare. It backs it up. It makes it so slow to load and unload the ride. And if you look at the wait times for any of these spinning type rides with Magic Carpets, Astro Orbiter, Dumbo, Astro Orbiter almost always has the longer queue, and I feel like so much of that is because of the elevator loading and unloading.
Yeah,
I would agree.
I can totally agree with that. I mean, I think I've done Astro Orbiter maybe once, but I don't know. I can agree that queue is just awful.
Yeah.
Like I think it's probably the best of the, carnival spinning type rides that are all over Disney, but even then, I don't think it's worth the wait, and just to be able to go up and see from a higher vantage point.
I totally agree. I never go out of my way to do Astro Orbiter. It always hurts my neck too, because you're just like you're flung back the whole time.
Yeah. So you had my number 1, so you can skip over me for that one.
Well, and you guys had my number 1 too. I'm dying to know what Brian says.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited because I thought yours was going to be Soarin'.
No, so this is what I'm thinking. You look at Soarin', yeah, it's a bad queue, but for my number 1, I think that Soarin' doesn't even come close to being.
It's got to be really bad.
Oh, it's bad.
Oh my god, the suspense.
And I'm surprised no one else has said it yet, but it is Triceratops Spin at Animal Kingdom. So I'm going to go into this saying, I know a lot of people really, really hate on the Dinoland USA area. I really like it. I think the cool, roadside carnival theme they do there is actually really neat. I do.
I'm on your side. I think the story behind it is awesome.
That's what it is. A lot of people look at this and they just say, it looks like a cheap carnival, and that's what it's supposed to be. If you really dig in to the background of Dinoland and why that's there and how it ties in with Dinosaur and the Dino Institute there, it's pretty cool. But all that said, the queue for Triceratops Spin is just awful. Outside, same as basically all these other ones that I've said, you're outside and nothing but switchbacks. It does feel like you're at a cheap carnival, and it's on top of asphalt, and it is baking just horribly anytime you have to stand in this line. So, no theming.
I gotta say, I've never even stood in that queue because I've never been on that ride.
See, if you're going to call that one your worst, what would you place everyone else that's in that section at? Because they're all pretty much the same. At least, I think so.
I would say with, Primeval Whirl, at least you're
kind of in the ride for that one.
Yeah, you are.
And you have some shade.
True, and it's, it's kind of that goofy, Carnival Funhouse thing with the mirrors and all that kind of stuff. So it has some theming, but Triceratops Spin, it has nothing going for it, in my opinion. By far, the worst queue at Disney.
So I'm going to say that I have to go back because I know you just said that you love the theming of Dinoland USA, and I'm so upset. But
I'll defend it.
So here's my thing. This is my biggest problem that I have with Dinoland USA. Yes, it's got a good story behind it, but is it a good story? I feel like it's such a cop out for just dropping that stuff in there. And it's not even like the Dinoland USA stuff that I hate. It's just that Chester and Hester section.
I know this is like anyone that's listening to this for like our past episodes is going to be, oh my god, Brian hates Soaring, but he loves Primeval World. I really love Primeval World. I think it's a fun little just like goofy ride, and you know, part of that is the theming.
Yeah.
For me, at least, I think the goofy, just kind of, you know, carnival style theming. It's hard to say that it fits in really well at Animal Kingdom, but at least you look and say the Imagineers took this, did something different with it, and tried to go kind of off the beaten path with the storyline that they did with everything. And, you know, I give them credit for that. So I like the area personally.
I like the area too, and I actually really like Primeval World. It's not something that I would ever wait more than like 10 minutes to get on, but I really like at like county fairs and stuff, how they have that crazy mouse ride, and it's essentially exactly the same.
That's what it is, yeah.
So I really like that.
To go
so
on
it makes
that,
sense.
Yeah, you get that kind of like carnival crazy mouse roller coaster, but you also don't have to worry about it falling apart because, you know, Disney actually made it. So
Exactly.
You get the excitement without the underlying fear of death. So,
But doesn't the underlying fear of death at the state fairs make it up more exciting?
that's a good point.
I mean, I might just be like super biased because I live near like Six Flags, so that's like half of these rides are roller coasters that are up here. And two, like every year we have a carnival that comes through, and I don't like these rides for some reason. So Chester's and Hester's just feels like such a cop out to me. I will give you though, I have ridden Primeval World a couple times, and out of the rides in that section and rides that are of that style, I definitely prefer that. But still, I don't know. So do we want to move on to the best now so we can stop fighting? Because I feel like we're all going to be on the same page for this one.
Hopefully.
Or at least close. I know that our top 3 are probably all going to be similarly or in line.
I feel like my top 2, I know, are going to be in y'all's top 2, but I think I have a bit of a curveball at my number 3, but we'll see when we get there.
Okay.
Yeah,
so this one, I want to go through my honorable mentions first. I know we kind of said no to this, but like my 6 through 9, because I didn't get 10, these are all interchangeable with 5. So you have some too, right, Beth?
Yeah, I have a few honorable mentions.
Okay, so we can go through those. Just name them. Don't give any reasons why, but we'll give those. My 6 was Enchanted Tales with Belle. 7 was Peter Pan. 8 was Jungle Cruise, and 9 was Under the Sea: The Voyage of the Little Mermaid.
Okay. I just had a 6, 7, 8, and they were Dumbo, Toy Story Midway Mania, and The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah, okay, I can see all of those.
I have one honorable mention, so this is my number 6, and Beth's probably going to kill me, but it is Flight of Passage.
Oh my god! I can't believe it. That was definitely higher on my list.
I'll have some explanation for that as I get through my list, but it's definitely it's a great queue. It's fantastic, but there's kind of a reason it didn't make it.
Sorry, I just want to drop those real quick just because I feel like if any of those aren't on anyone's list, I want to go back through them and say why I love them, because some of those were like hard pressed for almost number 3 or 2, but ultimately got bumped way down.
A lot to kind of this top tier of Disney queues that, like, when Disney does a good job on a queue, they do a really good job on a queue, and a lot of these, like mine 1 through 5, most of these could be interchanged. It's just they're all very, very good.
Right, and that was the hardest part because Peter Pan started as my number 3, and then every time I thought of another one, I was like, oh wait, no, that one deserves to be higher. That one deserves to be higher. And then it just got bumped all the way down to 7, and it's like, it's so hard to pick something like this. So I guess I'll start it off with my actual number 5, which was Toy Story Midway Mania. I've actually seen this queue get some pretty decent hate, and I think it fits exactly what it's supposed to. Everything is obviously to scale if you were a small toy. It looks like someone built a carnival out of toys, and that giant Mr. Potato Head, like, you can't beat any of those things, I don't think.
Yep, that was my exact reasoning for it being one of my honorable mentions.
Yeah, it's perfect for what it is. I mean, I guess it is a little long, but there's never a point in that queue, even when you're first walking in, because the transition is like that giant glass wall is a little rough, but honestly, everything from the second you set foot in that queue, it looks like it's supposed to.
Yeah, there's just so much detail to it, and it's I love feeling like toy sized and getting to see like huge versions of toys that I played with when I was growing up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I think this is going to be a lot of, the very similar type theming that they do when they open Toy Story Land, with you being shrunk down to the size of this kind of stuff. So
I really hope so, because I love that queue. Like I've seen it get so much like hate for being so long and everything, and rightfully so, because even when they opened that other track, that the queue was extra long, but it's a great queue.
So my number 5, I hope I don't get hate for putting this low on the list, but I chose Expedition Everest. And it was really hard to put it there, but I think I had a similar situation like you did with Peter Pan's Flight, where I had it really high and then I kept thinking of more and more. But that queue is just so awesome. It's so detailed. It's mostly shaded, which is always a plus, and it's educational, which I really like because I'm really nerdy about learning fun facts and like new things. So there's always something to read and look at, and I really like that about the queue.
Expedition Everest, it's my number 4 actually, but like I said, a lot of these it could be interchangeable as far as the place. I love
Everest was my number
queues.
3.
Really? Yeah. It's great. It tells a good story. It really builds up the theming of the ride before you get on it, and I love how it does. It starts out educational, and you're learning about all the climbers and the Sherpas and everything climbing Everest, and it slowly kind of like sprinkles in some of the Yeti, the Yeti pictures and the footprints and everything to kind of build the suspense of it. So I think it does a really good job of storytelling and fitting the theme of the ride.
So the reason it was higher on mine, just because, if I'm remembering this queue correctly, because I had to do this all by memory, it's been a while since I wrote this one, they definitely build the suspense of what the Yeti is through the educational stuff, and then as you start getting closer and closer, you start to think maybe this isn't just something they're telling me about, which is the whole point of that ride.
Right.
The top cues for me, it was definitely something that builds the suspense of the ride, so the second you step foot in that queue, that's where the ride actually starts.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
The way they blend the whole theming of the area around Expedition Everest too, with you have all the backpacks and stuff hung up around the shops and everything. It just it blends so seamlessly into the land area, which I think is, a lot of these that we're probably going to talk about in the best queues do a fantastic job of that, of not just saying, okay, we get on the queue and here's where the theming starts. It's how well it actually mingles with the land around.
Yeah, definitely.
So after just saying that, my number 5 does not really do a very good job at that, but I still think it is a fantastic queue, and that is Peter Pan's Flight. This is one where Disney, I think, is doing a great job of integrating this new technology, this new interactivity into their queues, and still making it fit with these classic attractions. We talked about how It's a Small World could really use an upgrade, and how Winnie the Pooh did a good job of bringing some of this interactivity into the queue. But I think Peter Pan's Flight is probably the best kind of classic Fantasyland theme attraction that's been given a remake of the queue that makes it interesting and that really fits with with the ride very well. I'm not sure if y'all have been on this one since they've redone it, but it's really good. A lot of stuff. You go through the kids' bedrooms from Peter Pan. and a lot of interactivity with the lights and the shadows and just all of the stuff around the room. It's very interactive.
Yeah, so this one was my number 4. Same thing, like you were saying, it's so interactive. It almost, and that's a very strong almost, makes it worth the wait. I've only been through the queue once because I refused to wait 60 minutes for Peter Pan's flight, but I literally right after they redid it, I was like, all right, I just gotta wait. Like, I gotta go through this queue because it's gotten so many rave reviews, and I really do think it was worth it, and it's really great for taking kids' minds off of the fact that they're standing in line.
I must be like super lucky because like every time we talk about stuff like this, I always have like a random story about how I just walked onto a ride.
Oh wow.
When Peter Pan's queue first opened after the refurb, I think it was my first day on one of my trips. We got there and Wishes was like halfway over, so we just booked it to the back of Fantasyland and just tried to like find a ride that would have a decently long line that had a short wait. Peter Pan had a 20-minute wait, so we just walked right on.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow.
And like, I mean, the 20 minutes was the queue. There was no one else in there. So I kind of like walked around and did all the interactive stuff. And that was like, I'd have to say that was what sold me on this being so good. It started as my number 3 and it just kept getting bumped down. But I really think that this could be interchangeable with anyone on my list for every reason you gave.
Yeah.
What I think is worthy of note with this one too is most of the other ones, well, actually looking at this, all the other ones in my best queue were built basically from the ground up when the attraction opened, or had very minor tweaks to it. When you look at what Peter Pan's queue used to be like and what it is now, and them still having to work in the show building that it was in, I think they did a great job of working with the space that they had and really, really improving on what it used to be. Because it used to be just like most of the rest of Fantasyland with these, old, just pretty plain-looking facades and then switchback queues up until you got on the ride.
Yeah, they did a really good job making use of that space.
Yeah, and I like the thing that stinks about that is there's a couple rides that have the same kind of space where it could have been something, or not could have been something, but it was like a show building they had to work with before. Same situation as Peter Pan, but they just, I don't know, it doesn't sell me on it as well. And that's kind of the same unfortunate fate that Small World has right now, where we just said it could use an update, but it probably won't get one. So my number 4, which I'm surprised wasn't lower on anyone else's wait, am I skipping ahead of someone?
No.
Okay. I feel weird because we don't have that 4th person. It's like very weird to me. My number 4 that I'm really surprised wasn't on anyone else's list is Star Tours. I really like the theming of Star Tours. I think it does pretty much everything you could want it to do. I will admit that the middle chunk is a little bit kind of dull from the part that you leave that Ewok village to when you get to the start of the animatronics in the queue. That might be a little dull, but I've never had to wait there long enough that it's been a problem. So I like really love that queue, and I could spend a while in there just looking at like everything, especially that Ewok village, because that's super passed by now, because Star Tours never really has that long of a wait. But even if you get trapped out in there, like it's still pretty neat. And I mean, it's simple, but it fits exactly what, you know what it is if you're a Star Wars fan.
Yeah, I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, but I have a funny story from my childhood about that queue back when it was, just Star Tours, not the Adventures Continue or whatever they call it now. I guess deep in my heart, I've always been like a really big environmental nature nerd because we were waiting in line for Star Tours and I was probably 6 or 7 years old. And we had like an empty popcorn bucket and I was just walking around picking up trash that people had dropped and putting it in the bucket, just cleaning up after everybody. And we get to a cast member and we're like, hey, is there somewhere we can throw this trash away? And they're like, why do you have this? And they're like, well, she got bored and started picking up all the garbage. And they're like, come with me. And they took us straight to the front. And I was like, yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they took us right to the front. And I was like, this is awesome. It always pays to be environmentally conscious. But yeah, my number 4 was Peter Pan's Flight, so we already kind of went over that one.
Expedition Everest. So, guess back to you again, Mario.
Well, surprise, my number 3 was Expedition Everest.
We're just gonna keep bouncing back and forth, I guess. My number 3 was Tower of Terror. I know everyone has really strong opinions on this ride, and I'm sure it was higher up on some of, like, maybe at least one of your lists. But we talked a lot about this in past episodes, but the detailing is just absolutely amazing, especially the lobby. I could just spend hours just standing in the lobby looking around, and it just has such perfect theming.
It's great. I think it does the best of any ride in any park that I've ever been on of building suspense. And I mean, Tower of Terror is a pretty scary ride in itself, but like every time I feel like my heart just like beating harder and harder as I get through the queue, like in anticipation. And it's really, I think, due to the theming of the queue because of how good it is. Not necessarily just because it's, pretty scary ride, but it just, the creepiness and it just builds it up so well.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold my sentiments on that because it's way higher up on my list.
My number 2, so I definitely love it. My number 3, though, this is my oddball one, and I think this attraction is somewhat overlooked. It's not a fantastic attraction, but it has, I think, one of the best queues at Disney. Obviously, I think it's third best, but it is Under the Sea, Journey of the Little Mermaid.
Yep. In
New Fantasyland. And I think a lot of people might not really like Little Mermaid or just say, oh, it's just another dark ride. There's, a ton of those at Disney, and if Little Mermaid's not my favorite ride, I'm probably not going to go on it. But this queue is, seriously, it's fantastic. I think it's one of the, most visually beautiful queues at Disney when you start outside with all these, seaside rock formations, and you move into the sunken ruins under, under the sea, under the actual interior part of the queue. It's just really breathtaking at how much work went into the architecture of it. It's interactive with different parts, and I think it's really cool that they have the scuttle animatronic in the actual queue. It kind of makes you feel like you're starting the ride really before you get on the actual ride, and I think it really blends well in New Fantasyland, which I think Disney did a good job at, because you've got really 3 different rides that don't have a similar setting at all, but they've somehow blended the seaside rock formations into the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train foresty area, and it works really well, and I think it's a really great queue.
So I had a really hard time because this was almost on my top. All of New Fantasyland, the queues are incredible. The only thing that brought this one down is that there's sections of switchback where it kind of goes into little caverns and stuff, which is weird because it still fits the theming really well, because you feel like you're in that underground, under the sea cavern. But I just feel like there's so many long spots without things to look at that kind of pulled it down a little bit for me. But you're right, everything in New Fantasyland is just spot on. I even had Enchanted Tales with Belle on here because the queue for that blew me away.
Also, I will say, I'm not sure if y'all have seen this, but Under the Sea also has probably the most insane hidden Mickey that I have ever seen before.
Every week you get me with these. I'm surprised.
I'm telling you, this is crazy. We'll have to post up a picture or a link to a picture in the show notes. I found this online. Someone had posted this, and they said, "Oh, look at this hidden Mickey that I found in Under the Sea." And I sat there and stared at this picture for, I'm not joking, 5 minutes. And I was like, all right, I don't see it. This guy was obviously just like joking with me or whatever. And I go in and look at the comments, and half of them are, oh man, that's crazy, that's awesome, that's so cool. And the other half are like, I don't see it. So I'm like, okay, either all these people are in on this joke and I'm not getting it, or this is really an insane hidden Mickey. And what it is if you go through and look back at some of the rock formations at just a perfect angle, like 3 of them line up and it forms the outline of Steamboat Willie. And it's crazy to look at.
That's crazy. Like I said, every week you catch me with one of these things, and it still surprises me that you come up with these.
We'll have to get this picture up because I didn't see it until someone posted or reposted the same picture with like a Microsoft Paint outline of what I was supposed to be looking at. And when I finally saw it, it was crazy. For them to put this much detail into the carving of the rock formation and line everything up at this perfect angle to look at it, it is so cool.
Yeah, I've never seen it in person, but I saw that picture circulating too, and I thought that was really crazy.
I feel like I'm the only person that hasn't seen this. Wow.
Oh, we'll have to get the picture up then.
Yeah, send me it. I'll put it in the show notes.
It's very cool.
So that moves on to my number 2, right?
Believe so.
Oh boy. So this one and number 1 were interchangeable for me. Totally, hands down, and it's not going to surprise anyone that I'm saying either of these. But my number 2 was the Haunted Mansion. We talked very briefly about this last week, about how the queue, and even before you get into the queue, it's just perfectly set in where it is. It's the creepy house at the end of the street. And as you get closer and closer, things are obviously more weird about it. The interactivity in the start of the queue, like where all the lines curve and stuff, all of that stuff is just spot on, and it does everything I need it to do. The reason it was almost my number 1 was probably because of the Halloween stuff. Like I think, Beth, you said you did Not So Scary, right? I don't know if Brian said he did. Did you?
I haven't yet. No, I'm going this year, but
okay.
I have not been yet.
So make it a point to do Haunted Mansion during the party, not before, but during, because they actually have like some of the haunts in the queue that will interact with you, and that was like the coolest thing ever. I probably wouldn't have put it as high on my list if it wasn't for that, but that was actually almost the reason it was my number 1.
Wow, I'm like really sad that I've never ridden it during the party now.
Have you seen pictures of it? Because they, even just looking at pictures, they're incredible.
I went and did like the magic shots with the PhotoPass photographers in front, but that's as far as I've made it, because to me during the party I'm so focused on watching Boo and the stage show that I'm not trying to ride a bunch of rides. But you're absolutely right, I can't believe I've never ridden Haunted Mansion during the party.
So the weird thing about that is that I think a lot of people have that same mentality because the line's fairly short. I think they really anticipate a lot of people in there, and that might be why they do it, or they just do it because, it's not so scary and it really fits with the theming. But that one bench that's there has some haunts on it, and I believe there's another section of that queue that has some people in there. But it's just such a cool thing, and I'm super happy that Disney does it. But every time that the one time I went to the Halloween party, we went on it twice, and it was awesome. But you have to wait till it gets dark because that's when they come out.
Well, I wasn't planning on going to Not So Scary this year, but
I think I just sold you.
Yeah.
Haunted Mansion made my number 1.
Haunted Mansion was my number 1 as well.
Yeah. It, for all intents and purposes, for me, the queue is part of the attraction. Mm-hmm. Going through the graveyard, if you're not taking the time to look at all the stuff going on around you, and I would say even before they've done all the new additions to it, like just the graveyard itself and walking through the grounds of the mansion, it sets up the ride. And if you're not taking the time to look through it, you're missing out entirely on one of the many things that Haunted Mansion has to offer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going back and forth for a while between my number 2 and Haunted Mansion, which ultimately ended up being my number 1. And the reason that it like secured being number 1 was because of the stretching room.
Yep.
I know like that's kind of part of the ride, but I consider it to be mostly part of the queue.
I don't think the
Yeah.
ride technically starts till you get on the ride vehicle.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
So I would say that the stretching room doesn't quite count for that. So I would say it counts as part of the queue.
Yeah, so that's why it ended up being my number 1. But my number 2 was Flight of Passage. So, like I said, I was
Surprise.
yeah, I was teetering back and forth. Isn't it funny that my 2 favorite queues are my 2 favorite rides? It's funny how that works out. But the Flight of Passage, I think it's so amazing. I went during an annual pass holder preview, so I kind of got to stop and smell the roses the whole time and not worry about people behind me or people in front of me, and just stop and look. And I took as much time as I wanted, and I still don't feel like I saw everything or spent enough time just in the queue. And of course, going back to not ruining it for people who haven't been on it, but there's different parts. You're outside for part of it, and there's so many details with all like the plant life and stuff. And then you go inside and does a little bit of the bioluminescence that they have been, boasting about during the nighttime views of Pandora. And then, of course, there's the laboratory scene, which is, in my opinion, by far the best part. It's just so high tech, in my opinion, that they really did this perfectly.
I still haven't seen it, so I could not place that on my list, but everything I've seen has led me to believe that would definitely be up on my high on my list.
Yeah, I also did this I'll say I got to walk through the queue for the pass holder preview, and I didn't get to go on the actual ride until about a month and a half after that. But honestly, just getting to walk through the queue of this attraction was incredible. I'll say it's probably the most visual stunning queue at Disney. Just with, like Beth said, with everything going on with it, there's so much stuff to look at, and how much the scenery and the theming of it changes from the beginning of it until the end. I mean, there's like 3 or 4 different like theming elements that you're going through, and that change as you move through the queue. It's really great. I think probably the only reason it didn't make my top 5 and was number 6 is just, one, it is incredibly long. It is a hike to get up through this thing. I mean, I don't know exactly how long it is from start to end, but you'll be tired by the end of it if you are walking from start to end. And 2, as visually stunning as it is, the other ones in my top 5 I thought did a better job of storytelling, but Flight of Passage is probably definitely the most visually stunning of all of them.
Yeah. From what I've heard, the queue is about half a mile long, and it is equipped to hold 5+ hours worth of people. So I think it's really cool that instead of just, kind of taking the easy way, they did make it these different sections, so that way you're not stuck looking at similar stuff the whole time you're in the queue. Because, if you're not going during extra magic hours or during a fast pass, at this point, you're probably going to be waiting a couple of hours.
Mm-hmm.
See, it has to, though, and that's the thing. Like you said, it's got to hold enough for the weight that it has. And, I mean, I haven't seen anything about it. I'm really avoiding spoilers, but the fact that it's that long does not surprise me by the wait times I've seen on that.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be a long time before those die down. I mean, when we saw how Frozen's line was when it first, was introduced and opened, and that, a lot of that was probably on hype, and that, Disney kind of planned for it. Okay, yeah, it'll be really popular when we first open it, but after a while, people aren't probably going to be lining up for these 3+ hour waits for Frozen like they are now. Flight of Passage, I don't really see this changing anytime in the next 5 to 10 years of it not having these 3+, 4+ hour waits. It is an incredible attraction. It's wonderfully done. It's thrilling, and it fits in perfectly with the theming in Pandora. So I think this one's going to be quite a wait for some time.
And I gotta say that this is one of the only rides that I would, if I didn't have a fast pass, that I would actually wait if it was I would wait, I think, if it was less than 2 hours. Like 2 hours is probably my cutoff, because at that point you're just wasting too much time. But, I can't speak for the rest of my traveling party as to whether or not they would be willing to wait with me. But I would be willing to wait that long, especially having ridden it. It's just like, I just want to keep riding it over and over and over again. It's just such a good ride.
I can't say that I'm not going to wait for it, but to the same breath, I really do think that this is going to hold a line for a very long time, at least until we see Toy Story. I don't think it's even going to chip away from where it's at. So,
yeah, with Animal Kingdom right now, it's, you've got a lot of other stuff to do there, but a lot of people are still going to come and just want to hit attractions. That's just how a lot of people do Disney. And when you look at the e-ticket attractions there, it's really just going to be it and Expedition Everest, and maybe throw Kilimanjaro Safaris in there. So for that time, there are going to be people coming, probably hopping just to get over there, get in line for Flight of Passage, and then leave. So even with other stuff opening up at other parks and there being other stuff to do in Animal Kingdom, I think this one's just, it's got too much potential to hold a lot of people, and it's going to continue to do that.
Yeah, I agree. So do we want to move on to number ones?
Well, you already know me and Brian's.
Yeah.
Down to you again.
You know mine, because it's already been said. My number one is Tower of Terror. Surprise! I confessed my love for this a couple weeks ago, and I still will hold this until the day that they get rid of it. It's another one that the second that you see it, it starts the queue, it starts the theming. And once you step foot in that queue, everything starts to deteriorate the closer you get inside. And then once you get in that lobby, it's just, there's something wrong. And I just love everything about the tower queue. Like I said the last time, I could spend hours in this queue just looking at the little details. Even though it's not very long, if you kind of think about it, since most of the wait is in that little holding room where they play the movie, which even that in itself is a great themed area. And then right down to the boiler room, everything is just so flawlessly themed, I think.
Can I just say, have you guys ever been in that room where you're watching the video and you know how it ends, where he's like, you're entering the Twilight Zone? That's the last line before you go to get in the boiler room queue part. Have you guys ever been in there with somebody change the ending, someone in the audience?
No.
Because I've been in there a couple of times, and people go, you're now entering, and then they speak over the host. I can't remember his name. Rod Serling, I think.
Yeah.
They speak over and they say, you're now entering the gift shop. And I just, it totally ruins it.
It really does, but that's still pretty funny.
It's it's funny, but at the same time, I'm like, can you not?
Oh boy, that was a very hard list. Were there any honorable mentions that anyone had that we want to talk about real quick? Because I feel like we should at least touch on some of the ones that weren't said.
I want to talk about Dumbo for a second. I feel like
I was so hard pressed for that one. That was probably my number 10 if I had to pick one.
It was my number 6. So it was I didn't think it was good enough to make it in the top 5, but it was in my honorable mentions. I just, since they redid it, I think it's such an awesome waiting area, because it's, when you go to a restaurant, you get the buzzer and you go sit and hang out, and it's the same idea. You get this nice air-conditioned room. If you have kids, they have a little play area. But my problem is that I feel like the line is hardly ever long enough to warrant it.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And the cool thing about Dumbo, like you said, that little buzzer and the play area, which is fantastic if you have kids. I mean, I don't, but still, that's got to be like the coolest thing ever, that you can just let them go do their thing. It buzzes, you get on the ride, and then, you ride the ride. Why doesn't Disney do more things like that?
Yeah.
Dude, it is such a good system. You could use it in a lot of rides, especially in Magic Kingdom.
Which ones do you think you would put that in if you had to pick ones that could get a system like that? I mean, probably
really?
Astro Orbiter. I would say that's probably on your list.
Yeah, I mean, like, my top 3 worst queues were the other 3 spinning attractions at Disney. Like, I think that says a lot. They're, not super exciting rides. They're mainly focused at little kids, and little kids are going to be impatient. So if you give them something else to do while they're waiting in line and have a buzzer to just come back, I mean, I just think it's a great idea, and it wouldn't be that hard to implement in other places. Now, building an actual playground area for them might be difficult, but even if they don't have that, if they just have the buzzer system, I think it'd be a huge improvement for the others.
Okay, so now I'm gonna detach myself for a second. It's been a while since I've walked through that Chester and Hester's area, so no one can kill me for this. How far away is it from the Dino Dig area to the spin ride?
It's enough that they could probably do that.
Because that wouldn't take anything for them to do, and that would knock your number 1 right off that list.
That's an excellent idea, actually.
I agree. I was also thinking, I don't know how difficult it would be with, space constrictions, but why not, make a lounge area for Soarin', and you could even theme it to, how airports have lounges?
That's an interesting concept.
You have way less complaints about how long and boring that queue is.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I never would have thought of that.
For it, too, in the Land Pavilion, I mean, there's lots of seating around there already. They really wouldn't have to do much of anything other than actually bring the buzzers in.
Armchair Imagineering at its finest.
Take our ideas, Disney.
Has anyone done Enchanted Tales with Belle? Because I really want to talk about that queue too.
I have, yeah.
It's one of those things that, even if you don't have a kid, it feels so weird to ride or to go in.
I know.
But one, that wardrobe, that animatronic is awesome, and then the fact that it splits to go into the castle, that alone blew me away.
I still don't understand it.
Yeah, no, I don't at all.
And don't ruin it for me.
I don't know how it works, and I just...
Yeah, I don't either, but it's an incredible effect for sure.
And that's another one that fits the land area so well. They knocked it out of the park with New Fantasyland. I think every one of them was almost on my list.
Yeah, and that Lumiere animatronic.
Oh boy, that one's so good.
It's funny because almost all the, and there's not a lot of them, but pretty much all the animatronics in there are very, very, very high quality, in an attraction that is obviously one of the cheaper ones that Disney has done, but it's still really great. So,
the weird thing about those animatronics is I'm pretty sure they're all projector faced, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so.
Most of them are.
I know the wardrobe. I think the wardrobe one is. I'm not sure about Lumiere though.
And he's got to be at least partially. But the thing that really disturbs me is I can't do that when they do it with the people-faced characters like Seven Dwarfs Mine Train and Frozen. I hate the animatronics on, but I love these.
Just don't try to take a picture of them.
Oh yeah,
It comes out so creepy looking.
Yeah, very much so. I'm also really surprised that no one had Jungle Cruise on there. That was another one that kind of...
I honestly don't know if I've ever waited in the queue. I always fast pass it.
The only reason I would have put it on my top, because that was my number 7, the only reason I would have put it up there was because the queue itself, if you listen to the little announcer thing, there's a lot of little puns and add-on things that definitely go hand in hand with the ride.
Queue itself is kind of so-so for me, but yeah,
it's very lackluster.
The PA announcements really, really make it.
Yeah. So I think that just about puts us at time. So it's a good thing we did both the best and worst. So we'll wrap it up here. If there's anything else anyone wants to say, chime in on before we tie it off.
No, I think this is a good place to end.
Cool. And next week it probably won't be so weird because we'll have Kirsten with us. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today, folks. Thanks for joining us again on another episode of the Station 71 podcast. Be sure to like us on Facebook at Station 71 Pod. We're on Twitter at Station 71 Pod, Instagram at Station 71 Podcast, and be sure to subscribe anywhere where you get your podcasts at. That way you don't miss another episode. We hope you enjoyed your ride, and we'll see you real soon.